Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Pursuit of Progress. I'm Ben Adams, and I'm excited to dive into today's episode with my co host, Adam Lang. Adam?
What is going on? Excited for this one.
Yeah, today we are talking about something a little different, thinking 10 years ahead. Now, let's be real. Most of us start the year focused on short term goals and short term resolutions, but what if we zoomed out? What if we imagine the person we want to become a decade from now and started making decisions today to move toward that future? As Stephen Covey said, begin with the end in mind. And in this episode, we'll guide you through creating a clear vision of your future self, breaking it into actionable steps, and showing how long term thinking can shape your daily life. Stick around because at the end of this conversation, you'll have the tools to not only dream big, but to actually build the life you really, really want. Now, let's jump right in. Adam, great to have you.
What's up, man? Season 2. Got a big one today. We're going to, fall into the bandwagon of talking about some topics that are important for the New Year's resolution folks out there listening. New year, new me. Well, you guys will have to decide for yourselves after this one. Before we kind of dive in, one other quote or just principle or thought that I've really kind of been thinking a lot of recently when it comes to this exact point is it goes something like, you'd be amazed at how you can get a lot less done in 1 year than you thought you could, but you can do a lot more in 10 years than you ever dreamed of. And just the reasoning for that is this long term, future self thinking. And the only caveat to that I'll add is just consistency, not changing your direction every year, but finding what is that goal that you have and sticking with it, because then that with the long-term consistency is really where you see this dramatic change with compounding and just a massive amount of growth.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the industry that I'm in and you're in, one of the things that always cracks me up is I just see so many different real estate agents and loan officers constantly changing their bank or their platform or the company that they work for. When you do that, it is such a disruption to the momentum that you're trying to build. And, yes, you want to make sure that the place that you're working and creating your livelihood and your career is a great fit based off of your goals, your vision, and your values. But it's those things that can become cost prohibitive towards that vision that you have. And when you start to have bigger goals with longer time frames, it just gives you more purpose today on what actions, steps, and mindset you have.
Love that. Well, let's start us off from the top. What's the first thing you want to talk about?
Yeah. So since we're having this conversation, so what is it about thinking 10 years ahead and why is that so important versus what you just mentioned on the intro a minute ago? For everyone out there that's so focused on the shorter term, the New Year's resolutions, what am I going to do different this year? Why do you think and why are you saying that thinking 10 years out is so important?
I'm a big proponent of having, you know, dreaming and having goals so big that even if you only hit 50% of that goal, you're still much further along in achieving more than you would be if you just set kind of a realistic, reasonable, kind of a softball type goal. With a group that I used to be a part of called EO Entrepreneur Organization, it's a group that's all over the world, just basically connecting entrepreneurs, and you meet monthly and you go through this whole process of how to scale your business. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting with that is just understanding what a BHAG is, BHAG, which stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And this is something that everybody from Steve Jobs to Elon Musk, everybody that really achieves that next level of success is very aware of having goals so big that it's totally changing every aspect of the business today and how you're running it. You're running your business today with the goal of this crazy, big, hairy, audacious goal you have in the future, because having that such a massive goal will change just what types of tasks and projects you're working on today. You're not playing it safe. You're always pushing yourself to grow when you have such a big target in the future. So that's just one little thing I think of when I hear what's 10 years in the future. What type of goals does somebody have?
Yeah, and the reason that that's so important in my mind is because when you do have those really big, hairy, audacious goals, and I think it's really important to have those. I think it's important to have those goals that are the way that I describe it. You want to have goals and a vision so big it actually frightens you
Mm-hmm.
to be able to think that big. But then you also want to have those actionable steps on how you can move towards that every day, every year. But the reason that I think is that's so important is because when you have those really big goals, you can then self-reflect and you can say, are the things that I'm doing today, how I'm earning a living, what my job is, my beliefs, my values, my daily habits, are those going to allow me to get to this goal? And if they're not, that means that if you want to achieve this outrageous goal, you're going to have to start changing things today.
Mm-hmm. When you have this massive goal, whether it be 10 years in the future, it doesn't have to be 10 years either, guys. I mean, it could be 5 years. It could be just far enough in the future where it is this massive goal to really pursue that. At that point, you also have to reverse engineer, like Ben's saying, to get to point B. What do I need to do today to put myself in a position to get there? And this framework of reverse engineering down from big projects down to smaller projects, sometimes those are called rocks, down to
Yeah.
even pebbles or just daily tasks to move the needle towards that. It just again changes your whole frame of mind with what types of activities and projects you're working on a daily basis. The only other thing I would add to that is when you have this reverse engineering framework, if you're doing it correctly, when it's finished, you're going to have some KPIs, some key performance indicators, some sort of measurables to then really be able to accurately track if you are progressing. And having those metrics is probably the biggest, I think, competitive advantage any entrepreneur can have, is to really have a close, very intimate understanding with their business and what it really is that's moving the needle and moving them towards that big goal that they have. Without those metrics,
Yeah.
you're really just throwing, darts on a wall with no target no target.
And the more action you take, the more those KPIs will emerge and they'll be easier to identify. So if you're getting results from this specific activity compared to this one, well, you're going to want to focus on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe this other activity is going to allow you to compound your results. But you have to take action to start figuring out what those things are for you. I'll share a personal story here. I've always believed in setting goals. And one of the first financial goals that I set for myself is when I was in high school. I was a teenager. I was 17 years old. And I wrote on a piece of paper and then hung this on my wall in my bedroom as a teenager, junior in high school, that I wanted to own my first investment property by the time that I was 30. And I wanted to own 5 investment properties by the time that I was 35. And I took that piece of paper, I hung it up in my room as a high schooler. Then when I went to college, I took that with me in college. And when I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, I had that hung up. And so it was always in front of me. It was always hung up in my bedroom of every home that I lived in. And guess what? It didn't happen. But like you were saying, even though I didn't hit my goals, it did happen shortly after that. And when you have a longer term vision, it just gives so much more clarity to your daily actions and habits. Where if you have, and that's the problem with most Americans, we just don't have any goals or vision. And if you don't have a goal or vision, it's easy to say yes to the thing that doesn't serve you. It's easy to say yes to the relationship that is not in your best interest, or this or that. Having the vision and the goal and the 10-year mindset, it gives clarity in the present, and helps you, focus on who you are, what your goals are, and what you're looking to achieve. And then kind of just final thing here. What's that quote? I'm not going to say it correctly, but it's like, I'll show me your habits today and I'll show you who you are 5 years from now. Something like that.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know. I know what you're talking about. I don't know the exact wording on that one, but The only other thing I'll add before we move on too is when you have this reverse framework that I was mentioning earlier, and you become very diligent on putting the time and effort into, really committing yourself to not only being true to yourself, but really putting the effort into building out this, reverse engineered business plan for most
Mhm.
jobs, especially anything that's sales related. So any entrepreneurial job, any small business, any sales job, for these specifically, what's great is by doing this business plan, by reverse engineering to get to that goal that you've set for yourself, this massive goal, you're going to get to a point where you're going to have to figure out what the dollar per hour of your time is worth. And when you've been able to establish that, let's just say you've, figured out, let's just say you're like, I'll use me as an example for real estate. You're selling real estate. You identify all the costs associated with the transaction to sell a home. You figure
Yeah.
out that, it takes 60 hours of total time and you make X dollars. So it comes out to your value or your dollar per hour worth is $100 an hour.
Mhm.
Now you're able to look at your daily schedule. I'd recommend doing it for a week straight where you just write down every single task you do throughout the day for a week. And now looking at that list, you can start to identify what items on there, what tasks are on this list that are worth less than $100 an hour. Which of those tasks on there are worth more? Let's just use
Okay.
grocery shopping. You spend 2 hours going to the grocery store per week, maybe 2 separate visits throughout the week to the grocery store. Well, man, you not only spent $200 on groceries, you also, invested 2 hours of your time, which is another $200. Could you have paid a little bit higher price, maybe paid a, Uber Eats type, not Uber Eats, but like the whatever that shopping one is, like a Instacart to get your groceries
Mhm.
delivered.
Mhm.
There's creative ways to do that. You spend a bunch of time mowing your lawn each week. Is that worth the $40, or is it worth maybe paying the neighbor down the street, like some neighborhood kid to do that for you? Just it changes your perspective on what you're worth, what your time is worth, and allows you also to start saying no more often to things that probably aren't worth that time. And I know, Ben, for you, I know you're really a lot better at this than I am when it comes to just networking and grabbing lunch and coffee with different people that you might want to try and be doing business with. I agree that that's important, but same concept here, is the 2 hour coffee or lunch with another loan officer or a realtor, is that worth the $300-$400 of value of your time that might be kind of related to? So just having that understanding, I think, is one last point I wanted to bring up about
I think
this.
that I'm so glad that you brought that up. And so what do you think most people would say if you brought that up to your average American? What do you think they would push back on that? Like they would probably say, well,
Absolutely.
I can't afford it, right? Or I
Yep.
can't, it's not in my budget. But here's the thing. Here is the thing. They're probably right. It's not in their budget. But the mistake is they have things in their budget that shouldn't be in their budget. So the car payment, that's $900, that should only be $200. Well, if you have a car that's appropriate to your income, or if you eliminate all of these other expenses, a lot of times it is in your budget. And so I think that's a great point. And I recently read a different definition of wealth, and it talked about exactly what you were being able to, like, this person was describing wealth is getting others to be able to allow me to free up more time so I can then spend that time on the things that I value and with those that I love. And that's exactly what you're describing. Is there
Mm-hmm.
a cost? Of course there's a cost, but as long as you have the right focus and you're spending money on the right things, most Americans, they don't spend their money on the things that truly give them value. They spend money on things that others tell them are valuable, but they don't actually, when does the new car feel and smell wear off? A month, 2 months, but that car payment lasts for 7 or 8 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I think the other caveat to this is you have to be busy enough to, you need to be honest with yourself and spending that time that maybe has been freed up by paying to have your lawn mowed or whatever it may be. You need to make sure you're then using that time appropriately and actually investing that time in an activity that is more of an income producing task. You don't pay somebody $40 to mow your lawn and then instead of mowing the lawn, you sit on your butt and watch, a couple episodes of your favorite TV show. It's got to
Yes.
be a direct, um, relationship where the time that you're freeing up is being used to do something that's productive.
I don't like tutoring my kids or helping them with their homework. I stopped doing that when they were in second or third grade because it causes a lot of stress, and we get at odds with each other. It negatively impacts our relationship. So you know what I decided to do? I decided just to hire a tutor. And so now a tutor comes over to the house still to this day in high school 3 or 4 times a week and supports them with their education and their learning. And not only that, helps them stay on track. And the tutor takes care of everything. They do grade checks, they stay in touch with teachers. It's like I'm there, I'm available, I'm CC'd in these emails. I'm the one that's going to parent teacher conferences, but I have this other person that is an expert in that field that is doing these things daily. I think I shared this with you, but we have had a nanny here at our house for most of the last 7 or 8 years. She had been on break for a year plus, but she just got back after New Year's. And having her back, it frees up just the cooking, the cleaning, staying tidy, and exactly what you're referencing. Those domestic items, they are so important because that's what brings peace to a house, in my opinion. If your house isn't organized and well maintained and clean, you're not going to have a peaceful house. So it's very, very important. But is it in my best time to be the one that's actually doing those things? Probably not. And so having her here, she lives here. She takes care of that. She supports the kids, and it just frees up so much more of my time, so I can do things like this.
You guys want a good book recommendation, and it's also a really good audiobook, read The 4 Hour Work Week. It's an older book by Tim Ferriss, but he takes this to a whole nother level, just with delegating everything he possibly can to give him this sense of peace, like Ben's talking about, and being able to have all of his time and energy focused on stuff that's truly going to make more of an impact in his life.
I have that. I've never read it, but it is in my library, so I'll need to
It's
actually
long.
read that one.
But yeah, then there's a ton now. If anybody's listening that is interested in that, there's a 4 Hour Work Week for realtors. There's like probably 15 or 20 of them at this point. So you could even find one that's a little bit more specific if that helps.
Well, let's move on to topic number 2 here. And Adam, I wanted you to talk about the importance of visualizing your future self. So we talked about the importance of having a vision, but what does that person look like 10 years from now? The person that has the big vision, the goals, the 10-year goals. What does that person look like? Who do you need to become to achieve those things? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so we could go a few different directions in this. So I'll start off by just saying, for me personally, yeah, you need to have, I think material things, obviously, that's not going to provide you with long-term happiness, but there is some level of, happiness, satisfaction, enjoyment you get from material things. So I think it's totally acceptable and fine to have some of your visualization incorporate material things, whether it be, getting on to one extreme I'll use, getting on a private jet with your family to go on a vacation, or it might just be something a little bit more realistic. Maybe it's just, it's a Wednesday afternoon at 2 in the afternoon and you're at your home relaxing with your family instead of being stressed out at work. There's a lot of different ways you can go about, visualizing things. But the thing that I'll just add for me personally is, so I take my dog Charlie on a walk or 2 walks every day, and the afternoon walk we take is a little bit longer. So I always have, a podcast playing or maybe some music. I've got a few music specific, some songs that whenever they come on, it kind of takes me to a certain place. Typically for me, it's Kauai. It's, maybe like kind of reggae rock type songs, but there's a few that specifically always just kind of, I visualize myself walking on my favorite beach there. It almost just kind of it's a mental thing where it just kind of snaps when that song comes on, and I just instantly, without even really thinking about it, go to this visualization. And that could be helpful for you guys, just finding one of your favorite songs that maybe create some type of emotion when you listen to it, and using that as a way just to kind of, subliminally take you back to that visualization space. But I think it's amazing how powerful visualization is when you hear about some of the stories of success with other entrepreneurs and just people in all different aspects of their life where, you know, they had a very specific vision for themselves and that came true. You know, manifestation is real in some level. I think there's you can go one extreme where I don't think, if I'm going to just tell myself every day I'm going to be the richest man in the world, that's realistically probably not going to happen. Or I'm going to be able to dunk a basketball, probably not going to happen. Beat Ben in a running race, probably not going to happen. But still, though, having visualization on realistic type things, I think they're very achievable, and goes back to just consistency. If you have that visualization on a daily basis, you're going to take action towards whatever that vision is.
I think it's so fun to think about, have these really big BHAG goals, as you described earlier. And then what I like to do is just really visualize that version of Ben who is 10 years older. And I like to ask myself, how does that version of Ben show up? How does he dress? How does he talk? What kind of relationship does he have with his friends and family? How is he able to reconcile things whenever there's conflicts? Have you ever seen the movie Meet Joe Black?
Yeah, I know it's a Brad Pitt movie. That's about all I can remember about it. But
Yeah, it's Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt plays the character Death, and the main character is Brad Pitt, and then the Anthony Hopkins character. Anthony Hopkins his character is the one who is getting ready to meet Joe Black, meaning that he's like going to die, and Brad Pitt is the one that's taking him. But the Anthony Hopkins character has such a reverence in that movie when he speaks, when he talks, the way that he engages others, the relationship that he has with his kids. There's so much depth to that character. He's respected tremendously. He's loved. He's adored. And in that movie, he's probably 70 years old, and that has always been the visualization of myself that I wanted. Someone that had those values and those relationships and that type of faith. And so I just think of that specific character in that movie, and I ask myself, am I making progress, and am I moving towards that? And growth is fun, isn't it? I think it's fun to grow and get uncomfortable and change. And it always cracks me up because in politics, if you grow or you change your opinion, you're considered a flip flopper and you can't be trusted. But of course, you should be changing. You should be changing your opinion. It's called growth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. The specifically with like the 10-year time frame. I think about, where was I at 10 years ago? Where was I at 20 years ago? And I like to think of it almost like a chapter in your life, and just, appreciating that. And, I think for me personally, I'm the most happy when I do have excitement and new things happening in life. And it's not just this mundane, repetitive Groundhog Day, for lack of better words, just having challenges and ups and downs. I'd much rather have the highs and the lows rather than just this very consistent level without much emotion at all. And I think, these decades of your life or these chapters of your life can really be good lessons when you start to think back on where you were 10 years ago versus where you are now. And for most people, I'm sure you're going to be pretty amazed at how different not only you are, but also maybe how different of a place you're in than maybe what you expected or where you expected to be 10 years ago when you were thinking about this.
And hopefully it's a better place.
Yep.
Because there's also those that don't take this stuff seriously and they're in a worse place.
Yep.
Or God forbid, you're someone that never learns these things, and then you're on your deathbed when you're 90, and then you just have massive regrets. That's one thing that I do too. I love to, I look at certain milestones in my life. And so one, for example, would be graduating from high school. That was 2001. So that was 24 years ago. Is that astonishing or what?
Yep.
And in a way, I mean, it does seem like it was a long time ago, but on the other hand, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. I have very crisp memories of my time in high school. Where am I going to be at 24 years from now? What is that going to look like? 24 years ago, I was here. Where am I going to be at in 24 years? And then the other, and kind of to your point a minute ago, where when you have a lot going on and you're trying to grow, there are going to be days where you're going to have anxiety and you can have some fear. You can be frustrated. Things aren't going your way. But then I always ask myself, would I rather go down this road, or would I rather go down the road that you were just describing a minute ago? The road where you know exactly what's going to happen. You're not going to be challenged. You're going to live in your comfort zone, because we know where that road leads and we don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so another thing that I do when I'm having those days is I just ask myself, what would the 100-year-old version of Ben, what would his advice be to the 42-year-old version of Ben? And I think that he would say, keep it up, toughen up. You're going to get through this. Just keep going. Just keep taking that step forward.
Yep. Not directly related, but I think of one of our mutual friends, Will. I'm in some coaching with him, and he brought this up last week that reminded me of this, where you hear people for the start of the new year talk about how, they want to lose 20 pounds. And then, people can joke and be like, yeah, I've lost 20 pounds every year, the same 20 pounds, just this concept of, in order to really get to that future self, going back in a lot of these topics we talk about all have very similar themes. And one of these is consistency. If you're not steering the boat in the same direction for long enough period of time to start actually getting some of this growth and success, you're just going to be going one direction to the next. And instead of any sort of progress, you're going to be right back where you started, because you just did a little bit here, a little bit there, that 20% or that 20-pound, concept. You're not going to ever actually see any growth because you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again.
You're living the same 6 months, 50 years in a row.
Yeah, there you
go. And kind of to further illustrate your point, people do the same thing with, diet. I mean, what you were just describing. They talk about a diet as if it's a short-term thing so they can lose the 20 pounds. Well, what a diet is a long-term nutrition plan. That's what a diet is. It's not something that you're only supposed to do for 3 months so you can go to the beach and look good and then forget about it as soon as you're done. That's what we're taught, though.
It's a lifestyle change.
Yeah. And all of this stuff that we're talking about, it's lifestyle change.
Yep. Well, this next one that we're going to talk about, sorry to jump in front of you there, Ben, but I know I've already talked a little bit about this one, so I'll just kind of get this one started again, but it's reverse engineering your vision. So we talked about, having this massive, big, hairy, audacious goal, and then reverse engineering what it's going to take to get there through larger projects down to these smaller rocks and pebbles, meaning like monthly and daily tasks, things that are steering you towards the right direction with this. The thing I'd like to just to kind of talk to you, Ben, about is the different categories that you can apply this to. It doesn't have to just be business. You don't have to be an entrepreneur to take upon this reverse engineering concept and apply it to your life. So what would be some of these other categories outside of just business that people might be able to apply this to?
Yeah, and these are things that are important to me. So, you have the career and business side, which is very important, but then you also have the personal finance side. I think sometimes people kind of mix those two into one, but they're very, very different. You have your career that you're building, the income that you're earning, but then what are you doing with that on a personal level? What are the goals, the vision from a personal finance perspective? So I have those as well. I have my career and business, then I have my personal finance goals. Relationships. What kind of time am I scheduling with the relationships that matter? My kids, my friends, my work partners. What do those look like? So that would be a goal for me. Health and fitness. And I am starting to get more intentional with my health, as far as like getting blood work done, getting health scans done on an annual basis, just because I do want to be very intentional there. I'm starting to get more disciplined with my nutrition, really monitoring what's going into my body. So in my mind, those are kind of two different things, but then I have the fitness too. The fitness is the weight training, the running with my daughter, the frequency and the intensity that we're doing that, the weight training I do with you. And then I would also say personal growth is another one, and spiritual growth. So for me, personal growth, doing things like this, getting to listen to podcasts. Another thing that when it comes to social media, and this is from a social media mentor of mine, he said that whatever you consume from social media, so however many hours you're scrolling, you should be contributing more than that. So if you scroll for an hour a day, you should be giving out or contributing at least an hour. And the problem with social media is that we're not taught that. We're taught to just consume, consume, consume. But you have to contribute as well. And when you contribute, there's something that happens with that equilibrium where you're not just consuming all the time, but that you're actually creating and you're contributing. It matters. It's pretty powerful. And then last would just be any hobbies, passions. And some of those are going to be higher priorities than others. But for me, this is something that I just started this year. I have a new journal that I started this year, and it's called it's like a life journal. And so it every journal is a quarter, so it's 90 days, and you break down your main objectives and goals for that 90 days, things to do, people to see, places to visit, and then you break it down from there into kind of your monthly goals, and then what are you looking at this week, and then what are you doing this day. And for the first time, anyway, and there's also a daily habit tracker built in as well. And so what I'm going to be doing is, really just filling this out, making sure that I am keeping the promise to myself that I'm doing the things that I say are important to me. A lot of us say things are important, but what do we actually do? It doesn't always line up.
Mm-hmm. Love that. That's a cool idea for a journal. I need to learn a little bit more about that sometime. The other thing I would just add when it comes to this reverse engineering topic is to not over leverage or overextend yourself. For each of these different areas that Ben just shared, again, relationships, business, health, personal growth, hobbies, all these different things, don't have 5 for each. I would say really only have 1, or maybe you have 2 for a couple of these, but you don't want to just have so much on your plate that then you're giving everything only 50% effort instead of 100%. You're much better off putting all of your effort into fewer things and truly giving it your all and your total commitment. And that's when you're really going to start to see progress, build some habits that then over a period of time will hopefully become a lot easier to do on a consistent basis, where then you can add on some new areas to work on improving. But just from personal experience, just don't put too much on your plate. I've done this a lot, and I continue to still do it with my business. Just new ideas, shiny object syndrome. You want to work on this, and this, and then all of a sudden you're not doing any of it because you're just so distracted and have too much on your plate.
Yeah, or when life throws you a curveball, something with my dog, for example, he's got like his 3rd ear infection. And so I took him back to the vet again today. He's got a double ear infection. And so it's like that's such a big disruption to my day to like take that time out, go take him to the and then it reallocates my time in some of these other areas, but I have to go take care of him, or with the kids there, something pops up, and so that's been a struggle of mine at times, is kind of putting too much on my plate, and then you feel a little bit overwhelmed, and you have the paralysis by analysis. You don't want to go do anything. So that's a great suggestion.
And then before we move on to the next one, I thought you had a really good quote. I think you put this in here. I don't remember writing this, but James Clear, very, very popular author. Atomic Habits is a great book. If you guys haven't checked that one out, for sure. But he had a quote in there: "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." And this again goes back to this reverse engineering topic, where once you identify your big, hairy, audacious goal, you reverse engineer to actionable steps that can be taken on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
That all is being done through building out a system, systems and processes, S&Ps. This is something that as I've started to, really search and find for higher level, more successful entrepreneurs, just people that are just finding a lot of success in whatever area of life they're in.
Yeah.
what it always comes down to is they have very solid structured systems and processes. Just
Hmm.
having that ability to take any guesswork out of it and just being able just to follow this game plan, and knowing that if you follow the game plan, there's no, gray, it's black and white. You're going to get success if you just follow the path.
Yeah, and to me, that's always been a little bit of an intimidating thought. Systems and processes. It sounds like I have to go do.
Corporate.
Yeah, I have to open up my computer and bring out some spreadsheet and. But you're right. It doesn't need to be, and it's something that can be as simple as what is the plan for today, and just planning your day the night before. One thing that I've realized with myself is everyone talks about morning routines. We've talked about morning routines in this podcast before. You know what? Fuck morning routines. You know what we should be focused on? Evening routines. Because if you don't have a great evening routine, it's going to be impossible to do the morning routine.
Yep.
And
And if
so that's one thing I am now really focusing on. That is my game plan for this year, focusing on the evening routine, because when I do that, my day is then planned the next day. I know what time I'm getting up. I know what's on my to-do list. That is a system and process. I have a game plan.
you guys are already at the point where you have a good morning routine, I would recommend trying to have being able to write down a few of your biggest tasks or goals for that day. But what I'm getting at is just having it be very clear on like what you're trying to work on for the day. And to Ben's point about the evening routine, the best first step to kind of add that into your tool belt is what's called an AAR. The military uses this term for an after action report. And this is just basically having some type of report. Again, that sounds like a corporate, pain in the butt thing to do. But I mean, it could be just as simple as just having 3 or 4 questions in a notebook that you just answer every single day at the end of the day. And it could be something like, how did I do today with my main 3 goals that are maybe something that you're working on with your personal life, whatever it may be. Just basically just being honest with yourself about these action after reports. And one last thing on this, don't do these at, let's just say you're working until 6 p.m. every night. Don't do these at 5:55 p.m. Do these at 4 p.m. That way, if you're truthful and just very, true to yourself when you're doing this report and you're realizing, you know what, shit, I didn't do these other 3 things that I was supposed to do. By doing this at 4 o'clock, you have enough time remaining in the day where you can still take action that day and still win the day, even if maybe you're a little bit behind where you were hoping to be at.
Mhm.
So anyways, action after reports are a great suggestion for one of the first things you can incorporate into your evening routine.
And one thing I started doing this year is I've moved my cell phone when I go to bed out. I used to have it on my nightstand. I've completely moved it out of the room.
Hmm.
And my cell phone now charges at night in another room away from me. And I have found that my sleep is so much better. I'm actually dreaming again. And all of the research and articles I've recently read about health, as I mentioned, I'm getting more intentional about that. One of the things that just keeps coming up is the importance of sleep, and how it's one of the healthiest things that you can do for your body, getting sufficient sleep. And I can tell you, and there's different depths and quality of sleep. And I have been someone the last couple of years where I have not been getting a lot of meaningful, deep sleep. And by doing that, and I was also the type where I'd wake up and like check my phone in the like 2 a.m. And then all of a sudden I'm popping on some social media app for a minute, like scrolling, like it. Why? I know I'm not the only one that's doing that. And so now the phone is not even in my room. It's not a temptation. I have my alarm clock right there. That is what gets me up. And then when I get up, I go to the gym, and then I'll check my phone, when I get back to the house.
Yeah, that last little point too, that's a big one. I've heard a lot of successful people talk about is, having the ability to not even look at your phone until, like, for a lot of people that work out in the morning, don't even open up your emails, don't look at anything until after, for example, you've gotten home from the gym. Just giving yourself that gift of not starting your day off on a bad note, not, having the email or the text, whatever it is that you're worrying about, just something to put a hindrance on your day. You don't want to start your day off on a positive note. And a good way to do that is, protecting yourself from your phone as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our next topic here.
So number 4 is just about long-term versus short-term. So how long-term thinking can really impact your short-term decisions. And this is something that you and I were talking about offline a little bit ago, just when it comes to car payments or just the material things and the
Yeah.
short-term value or the short-term enjoyment that you get sometimes from these expensive material things versus the long-term challenges of having to make that payment every month. I think that's what you used as your example. Maybe just elaborate on that a little bit more if I didn't explain that right.
Yeah, as I've gotten more experienced and mature just from all of the mistakes that I've made with my money over the years, and I'm a banker. I look at others with their applications. I see what they're doing well, and I see the mistakes that other people are making. So I have a lot of just constant feedback. And now I'm at a point whenever I have an important financial decision that I need to make, and it doesn't even have to be that high of a dollar amount. Maybe it's $1,000. It could be $10,000. It could be me considering purchasing a new car, a new home, going on a vacation. One of the things that I always ask myself about whatever it is I'm looking at doing is, how is this financial decision today going to impact me 5 years and 10 years from now? Is this decision that I'm making today, is it going to allow me to accelerate my wealth building and growing my net worth and acquiring assets? Or is it going to be a hindrance? Today's dollars are tomorrow's millions. And these are the questions that most Americans are not asking themselves. When you have someone that goes and purchases a new car, and I'm sorry if I'm going to be offending people out there, but here's the reality: most Americans should not be purchasing a new vehicle. And the reason for that is because they're overpriced, they rapidly depreciate in value. Most of the time, there's going to be a loan tied with it at a high interest rate. And then because the loan terms are so short, the monthly payments are going to be very, very high. So the average new car payment in 2024 was over $750 a month. As a banker, it's not uncommon for me to see car payments that are $1,000, $1,200, $1,400, $1,800 a month. And when you make that type of decision, let's say someone makes a decision and they have $1,000 car payment. I mean, and they have it over 7 or 8 years. Now, just think about the amount of resources that is over 7 or 8 years. And what if you had invested that? What would that look like over 7 or 8 years? What if you had used that to acquire an asset like a investment property? And then you start to think, and you were talking about going down this path or this path earlier in the episode. When you make enough decisions, you start to go down the wrong path. And so that is why it's really important to think about this stuff, because if you go down this other path, yes, it requires more discipline. And yes, it appears it may not be as fun, but here's the reality. I'm telling you right now, freedom and peace of mind is such a higher value than driving around in something that's nice or flashy, because that car, you aren't even going to appreciate it after a couple of months, and it's not going to be worth whatever you're paying for.
Yeah, in addition just to the peace of mind, just also the concept of just how valuable time is. And if you make enough of those wrong decisions, as you put it a few seconds ago, after a few of those, the only way to crawl out of that is by working more to pay that additional amount of money that it takes now to support your lifestyle. So now all of a sudden, maybe as just as an example, instead of working 40 hours a week, now you're working 45 hours a week to cover whatever that is that you've added, to your lifestyle. How much is that 5 hours worth? I mean, are you now unable to have legitimate, great aspects of your life taken away from you, like going to see your kids practice soccer after school, or, I mean, just there's so many restrictions with your time when you are forced to just be making additional money to cover those decisions you've made.
You go from living from a place of freedom to living from a place of bondage. All of a sudden, you don't get to choose. You have to go work the overtime or you have to go get the second job. Let me ask you this. Do you think the person that's living like that, do you think they're going to be creative? Do you think they're going to be living from a place of abundance? Do you think that they're going to be at home on the weekend and excited to have that side hustle or start that YouTube channel? They're not,
Burnout.
because they're going to be so exhausted from just trying to get the bills paid. They're living from a place of demand, while this person on the other path is living from a place of supply.
Mm-hmm.
They're living intentionally, they're living within their means. They have more resources than they need, and because of that, they live from a place of abundance. So going back to our conversation earlier, they have the money to hire the nanny, or they have the money to hire the YouTube editor and do some of these other things that they're passionate about. And all of that is fulfilling, it's exciting, it's empowering. And I'm sorry, no one's going to remember that car 10 years from now.
Yep.
They are not going to remember, people aren't going to remember what you're driving 20 years from now. But if you go achieve your dreams and your goals and you take a step every day, you will remember that.
Yep. Good. Definitely something very important just to remind ourselves about. Let's close it out with our fifth and final one. I think there's a couple good points on this one, so maybe saving the best for last. And that's overcoming common obstacles. And I'll start off by just talking about, just again, this analysis paralysis. Just what's so important is just to avoid the obstacle of changing direction and not ever getting to a place where you can have success in growth, because just when you're about to find that growth, that success, you hit some obstacles, you hit some challenges, and instead of persevering, you go in a different direction. You take the easier route and pick something else up instead, and just by doing so, you're just going to have so much limitation when it comes to your growth because of that analysis paralysis.
Yeah, and ultimately, you just need to take action. About 12 years ago, I had started a high heel accessory shoe app with my ex-wife.
Repeat that, Ben, so the audience can hear that again. What was that?
It was a high heel accessory shoe application for high heels, and it was this accessory that would go around high heels. It was called a high heel wrap, and you would be able to customize your high. It was kind of a cool design and a cool thing, but we had, oh my gosh, dude, like talk about off the mark and talk about like researching things that I did not even have any, you just got to go and like test it. Is this something that you'd be interested in buying? Great. Here's what it does. No. Okay. Well, let's, you got to get out there and just, I think so many people are afraid of getting rejected. Just go get rejected.
Yep.
Go get rejected. And then, let that be some of your feedback. Is there a market for this? Do I believe in it, or is there not? In my case, the mistake that I made is I just didn't have any business going into that type of product because it's not something that I'm passionate about, even though I did think it was a cool idea. I don't know anything about women's shoes or women's shoe accessories or women's fashion. I know more now than I did, but I don't know a lot now. And so it just wasn't the right place for me to be. And I lost a lot of money, wasted a lot of time, but I did learn.
And I would just add too, just, for overcoming obstacles, just understanding that we're all human, we're all going to make mistakes, and just changing your perspective on what a mistake or what a failure is, not being something that's such a dramatic, worst day of your life scenario, but it's really just an opportunity to then understand, like you're saying, that's a hard no or whatever it may be. It's allowing you to be a little bit more direction focused and hopefully more accurate with wherever it is that you're now focusing your time and energy and moving towards. So it's helping you get one step closer to success. And just having that more optimistic mindset behind obstacles and maybe short-term failures.
Yes. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, women's fitwear, She said that when she was a young child growing up, her dad would sit her and her siblings down and he would ask them, not what did you do right today, not what did you win at, but what did you fail at? And so in her house, they learned to celebrate failure. And by learning to celebrate failure, it wasn't because they were trying to go fail. What that taught them, though, is that you need to take action. You need to go out and try. And, there is, for everyone that's been successful, whether it's tech, business, athletics, sports figures, there's been even more failures. So you have to have failure is part of the process.
Yep. The biggest and best in the world, man. I always think about Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky. You miss 99% of the shots you don't take. Just, some of the stories about Jordan and, his obsession over the losses more than the wins, and just, some of his memories that he can recall from that was a documentary,
The Last Dance.
Yeah, The Last Dance, about, some of his most fond or just most vivid memories aren't about these championships. It's about his loss to the Pistons and Game 6, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just how that's the mindset of these champions and these very, very high achievers.
And you know what I was thinking about as we were logging on? And this is the honest truth, I was thinking about Adams Sells Denver and just all of the content that you're producing in 2025. And since I knew that we were doing this podcast, I was just thinking, how fun is it going to be for you in 2035 to be able to look back and reflect on 2025?
Listen to this one. I'll take that one step further and blow your mind. So, and I think Will and Eli. So again, you guys, whoever doesn't know, that's just a couple of my mentors, good friends. Ben's also close with both. He knows them both as well. But they were talking about the value of a podcast and how, in addition to just the opportunities it provides us to connect with different people and share their story and hopefully help just, grow our audience and be able to connect with new people. He talked about how what he always thinks of when he thinks about their podcast, who I think they've now got, I think they're maybe coming up on 150 episodes, maybe even 200, about how that's almost like a journal that'll forever be available. So like his grandkids, Will's grandkids, or maybe even just his daughter goes off to college and just is missing home and needs just to hear her dad talk and just get some encouragement. She can throw on the podcast, search a topic that maybe is relevant to her at that time and be able to connect with somebody. Like, I just think of like, what if podcasts existed when our grandparents or our parents were alive? Like, how amazing would it be for you to, turn on a podcast and hear your mom talking about, something that was important to her? Just the ability to have technology, basically connect different generations, even long after we're gone.
I've thought about that exact same thing with my YouTube channel and using it as a way just to document my life and lessons, though, and then things that I want the generations after me to really consider and value and understand. Like, you don't have to go make these mistakes. Here's my playbook. These are the things I messed up on. This is what I did well. This is what I learned. And, I always say that when you have kids, it's like with my daughter right now, she's getting very serious about her running. She's running almost 7 miles every night. She wants to be one of the best in the state. And when I was running, I didn't have that same mindset. I hadn't put the work in. I didn't know how to do it. But now that I do know how to do it, I can essentially download all of that experience to her just through our conversations, through our runs together. And so if she decides that this is something that she wants, she already has the playbook. Now she just has to go execute. And it's so much easier to do that versus that. It's like that first generation that's trailblazing. Like, they don't know what they're doing. They're making mistakes. They're getting, stuck in the Oregon River. They're not, they're making one mistake after another. I thought about the same thing, though, like with Abraham Lincoln and like some of these historical figures like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie. How fun would it to be to log on to their YouTube channel and just like listen to them give a lecture for an hour?
Yeah, it'd be awesome. Who knows where it'll be in another decade? I heard, just to close this out, I heard a prediction by a very, I can't remember if it was Gary V interviewing some AI technology type guy, but he was talking about the same idea where our kids or this next generation will be at a point where they'll be able to have a holographic video image on their wall of, let's just say for me, for example, after I'm long gone and dead, they can still have the technology through the AI conversational type, chat GPT type framework where a video image of me on the wall will be me talking to them in real time, or that 8-year-old that has this on their wall can ask grandpa, hey grandpa, man, I got picked on today at school, what would you do? And it's literally taking my persona, my avatar, and talking to that person. So just
But
crazy that some of that stuff
not
is
just
going to
talking
happen.
though, but sharing your values and share,
All
like
that stuff, yeah.
literally like sharing what you would share. And what have you seen that movie, the more recent Superman with Henry Cahill from like 2017?
Mm,
Russell Crowe plays a character in that movie that he's Superman's dad. And even though Russell Crowe's character is dead, it's his consciousness expressed as a hologram. So exactly what you're describing. And so his dad is kind of constantly following him around in, coming up in a hologram form. Um, he doesn't exist, but he does exist though. It's so interesting.
yeah. Who knows what we'll encounter in our lives, man? It's nuts. Well, I'll say a parting word before Ben closes us out. Guys, thanks so much. Again, we're having a good time getting season 2 up and running. If you are somebody that has some passion about something that's important to you in life, you want to maybe share it on the show, we are definitely looking for some more guests this season. So feel free to reach out, shoot us, either of us, a message on social media, and we'll connect with you and hopefully link up. And again, just really appreciate the support. The best way you guys can do that is just by sharing the show with somebody else you think might get some value from this. So we really appreciate it and look forward to a lot of exciting stuff here in 2025.
That's right. And to wrap us up, start challenging yourself to start thinking 10 years ahead, but make today count. That's my message. Until next time, God bless.
So, yeah.